Emeka Okafor, one of the curator of Maker Faire Africa. I was at the first Makers Faire last year in Ghana. Now we are here in Nairobi. What do you see as the most significant differences between these two fairs regarding the makers, first of all?
Well, one of the things I would say is that we have a broader variety of makers this time around. For lack of a better word, I would say there are quite a few electromechanical innovators here. We're seeing more complex systems as opposed to single devices. We have more makers who are actually from the region. And there is, even though we've only been around for a year, you get the sense that people, albeit those in a different part of the continent, are getting to know a bit more about what we're about. And I think for me that has been the most significant change, the broader and deeper range of makers and a greater awareness of what we are doing.
You were just mentioning what is this whole thing about. How would you describe what is Maker Faire Africa about?
Well, Maker Faire Africa is essentially a platform whereby innovators, inventors, creative types across all disciplines share ideas, showcase their products, interact with attendees and other makers, begin the process of building what we think is an essential community of what I like to term the productive class. That is essentially where we see ourselves as playing a key role. A productive class whose foundation is laid on building problem-solving systems.
Building problem-solving systems. What are the problems you see of people facing mostly in Africa?
Well, the problems run the gamut from issues in health, the fact that we don't have as much wealth creation as we should, and in many ways, some would say we have things backwards. If we look at how societies have developed, be them in Asia, going back even in Europe hundreds of years ago, one of the essential steps is that you had productive systems that allowed those countries to create wealth. And they had to draw those resources from within. We see Maker Faire Africa as celebrating resources that we already have, with knowledge from within and from outside. But the key determinant is that the system that is being built is one that is not reliant on anything but what surrounds it. And such systems ultimately become not just self-sustaining, but as they grow and evolve, they become autocatalytic. They begin to improve upon themselves. And in many ways, makers as we see them epitomize the very sense of problem solving that as a society acquires more of it, it begins to deal with its challenges very, very differently and not look elsewhere as opposed to inwards in terms of dealing with its challenges. And we want to make makers sexy. We want to make inventors sexy. We want to make innovators celebrities. In the United States where I live, some of the biggest cultural icons of years gone by were people who built things. Thomas Edison. It's also ironic for me that when we look at some of the biggest foundations, a lot of Africans talk about, well, we'd like to be supported by foundations, which is great and it's something to be applauded. But I would also like to we'd like to understand how foundations were built. Because someone built the fortune that allowed the foundation to exist in the first place. So let's ask ourselves and we need to be realistic about building. And building is equivalent to making, and making is a joyful thing, it's an interesting thing, it's a very satisfactory thing. It's not work. Most of the individuals around here have the biggest smiles on their faces. They don't see what they're doing as work. They enjoy it. And the fact that they're sitting next to other people like them, if anything, is one of the biggest takeaways for them. Because for some of them, they were toiling away on their own, and now they see others like them, and they realize, I'm not crazy. You know, there are people like me. Yeah. So for us, it's really about building the community, because when you build a community and the community begins to get stronger and sustain itself, all the other things come naturally. Businesses get formed, partnerships happen, and then everything else that people look for first actually begins to happen, as opposed to the other way around.
How would you see the market here in Africa? Is there a market for the products which are shown here?
Well, one of the things that a number of commentators will point out to you is that when you look at, for example, the informal economy, what these individuals produce is usually produced out of necessity and out of an immediate need. One of the key differences between the African maker community and what you would call the American maker community is that a large percentage of the American maker community is still of a hobbyist bent, because they have the luxury of time and of resources to tinker, and in their free time speculate a lot more about what they're doing. Within the African maker community, many of them don't have those luxuries, so they essentially focus on things that there tends to be an immediate need. That being said, there are tinkerers here, but on balance, the ratio, I would say, is more towards the necessity than the pure tinkering. So there is a market for the products, and we believe that as more individuals, Africans and otherwise, come into contact with what is on display, they'll begin to see their own societies very differently. I was just speaking to a Kenyan gentleman earlier who is in the software media space, and he said to me, Emeka, I cannot believe that there's this amount of innovation in Kenya. And when we were in Ghana last year, I heard the same type of commentary. So unlike what people may think, the biggest audience for Maker Faire is the indigents. It's having the indigents, be them Kenyan this year, Ghanaians last year, or whoever it may be next year, view their own communities very differently and see that there's a lot of potential there that in many cases is being unacknowledged, and also make them feel, to your word, proud about what their own people are doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you and your team has actually done the last 2 years is, I mean, Maker's Faire, you can call it successful. You've built some expectations. People want more. So what are the next steps for Maker's Faire? What can we expect in the next year? Where are you heading to?
Yes, we're still a few hours from the end of this event, but to take your word, yes, maybe we can see this as another successful event. There's a price of success. When we first started off, we were sort of unsteady, unsure, as if we didn't really know if anyone would even take us seriously or see this as something worth doing. Now we're in our second country, and there seems to be some momentum. I think one of the things we will look to do is find ways, sustainable ways, to foster these communities that we are nurturing with others on a more continuous basis, within the resources that we have. But this isn't something we can do on our own. We need to work with like-minded organizations. We need to find ways that are creative and resourceful to help and assist the makers assist themselves, but also bringing others who are looking to redefine and reframe what it means to educate, what it means to transfer knowledge, what it means to not follow traditional models and reach wider swathes of the population.
What are traditional models?
Well, this isn't particular to, sub-Saharan Africa. a lot of the educational models we have now are very hierarchical. They're very prescriptive. They have a process that at the end of it you achieve a very monodimensional result, and you're conferred with something that more or less tells the world that you passed this and now you could do that. But we now live in a world where so much is uncertain, so much is multidimensional. What you learned 2 years ago might not necessarily apply today. So many fields are no longer just about that field. You know, robotics takes influences from biomimetics. Mathematicians are looking at how ants and social insects work, and that could be applied in the financial services. So the extent to which we can break down traditional hierarchies that in many ways do not serve populations, be them in the developed or developing world, is something that I think we should look to even more. And I think institutions shouldn't see this as a threat. They should see it as something that they embrace. But on the other hand, if they do not absorb these changes, they could make themselves less and less relevant. We think that Maker Faire has an educational component. We believe that the bottom-up, non-hierarchical, non-linear way of looking at innovation and learning is something that can have so much more impact than the more didactic, instructional ways of doing things. At our fairs, we don't ask people what their credentials are, where they went to school, what they studied. What we're interested in when we receive an application form is what they've done. And that is very liberating, particularly for Africa, where our educational systems have tended towards creating people, nurturing people who are more administrative and less questioning in their take on a number of things.
Okay, so I do know you're a very heavy user on Twitter as well.
Pardon?
You are a heavy user on Twitter
Yes.
as well. So give us 140 characters on Maker Faire Africa. And a hashtag.
Maker Faire Africa, it presents a prism into what Africa really is about. It's as exciting and as engaging and as interesting as the best out there. It is raw, it's unadulterated, and it's invigorating. It's education and innovation in the future as we choose to see it. I'm not sure if I might have missed a 140 character hashtag.
Just a little.
You could edit it.
We'll edit it. We'll make 4 tweets. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.